The sky above Seoul turned black at exactly 3 in the afternoon. Not the black of storm clouds or night, but the black of metal. Thousands of ships hung in the air like dark clouds that would never pass. People stopped walking. They stopped talking. They looked up and felt their hearts freeze. Emperor Thraxus stood on his command platform, looking down at the human city below. He was twice the height of a human, with scales that shimmered like dark oil and eyes that burned yellow. He had conquered 847 worlds. Earth would be 848. He expected this to take less than a day. His voice boomed across the city, translated into every human language by his ship's systems. Humans of Earth, your weapons are nothing. Your armies are nothing. You will surrender now, or you will watch your cities burn. You have 1 hour to answer. In military bases across the world, generals shouted orders. Jets scrambled into the sky. Missiles launched. For 10 minutes, humanity fought back with everything it had. Thraxus watched the missiles explode harmlessly against his shields. He watched human aircraft fall from the sky like broken toys. He did not even need to give orders. His ship's automatic defenses handled everything. Pitiful, he said to his second-in-command, Admiral Corvus. They always fight at first. They never learn. Thanks for watching. Corvus nodded, his own scales a lighter gray than the Emperor's. Shall we begin ground operations? My lord, yes. Start with this city. Make it an example. I want every human to see what happens when they resist the Valtheron Empire. Large transport ships descended. They landed in parks, on streets, crushing cars beneath them. Soldiers poured out, each one carrying weapons that could level buildings. They marched through the streets in perfect formation. Humans ran. Some screamed. Some hid in their homes, hoping the aliens would pass them by. In a small apartment in the Seongbuk neighborhood, an old woman named Halmoni stood at her kitchen counter, hands deep in a bowl of salted cabbage. She had been making kimchi when the ships arrived. She was still making kimchi now. The radio on her counter babbled with panicked news reports. She turned it off. Too noisy. The door burst open. Her grandson Do-yoon ran inside, breathing hard, his face pale with fear. Halmoni! Halmoni! We have to leave. The aliens are landing. They're everywhere. Take off your shoes, she said without looking up. You're tracking dirt on my clean floor. Did you hear me? Aliens. Invasion. We need to go to the shelters. Halmoni finally looked at him, her face calm. And what will we do in the shelters? Sit in the dark and cry? I have work to do. This kimchi won't make itself. Halmoni, please. Have you eaten today? Do-yoon blinked. What? I don't. That doesn't matter right now. It always matters. Sit down. I'll make you something. There's no time. She fixed him with the look that had terrified him since childhood. The look that made him feel 6 years old again. He sat down. While Do-yoon sat at the small table, his leg bouncing with nervous energy, Halmoni heated up rice and soup. Outside the window, in the distance, they could hear explosions. Sirens wailed. Somewhere, someone was screaming. Halmoni set the bowl in front of her grandson. Eat. How can you be so calm? Do-yoon asked, but he picked up his spoon. Halmoni's cooking always had that effect. No matter what was happening in the world, her food made you feel safe. I lived through the war, she said, returning to her kimchi preparation. I lived through the occupation. I lived through famine. I raised you and your sister after your parents died. Space monsters? She waved her hand dismissively. Just another thing to survive. Down in the street, Halmoni's neighbors were gathering. The ajumas, the middle-aged and elderly women, who ruled the neighborhood with iron wills and warm hearts, stood in a small cluster near the corner store. Hei-jin, who owned the vegetable shop, was arguing with her husband about whether to close up or stay open. If aliens are taking over, people will still need vegetables, she said firmly. Soonbok, the oldest of the group at 79, nodded in agreement. Life continues. It always does. Ma Young-hee, younger at 62 but no less stubborn, looked up at the dark ships hanging in the sky. My grandmother told me about the occupation. She said the most important thing was to keep living. Keep your routine. Don't let them see you break. The women nodded together. They had survived difficult husbands, difficult mothers-in-law, economic crashes, and personal tragedies. They would survive this too. A Valtheran patrol came down their street an hour later. 6 soldiers, each one huge and frightening, carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained power. They expected the humans to flee or hide. Instead, they found Heijin sweeping the front of her shop. She looked at them, unimpressed. "You're blocking my door." The soldiers stared at her. One of them raised his weapon slightly. Heijin raised her broom. "I said, you're blocking my door. Move." The soldiers looked at each other, confused. They had been trained for combat, for resistance fighters, for military targets. They had not been trained for elderly women with brooms. After a moment, they stepped aside. Heijin nodded, satisfied, and went back to sweeping. Emperor Thraxus watched this interaction through his soldier's helmet camera. He frowned. What is wrong with that unit? Why did they yield to an unarmed female? The tactical officer reviewing the footage seemed uncertain. She displayed no fear, my lord. The soldiers did not interpret her as a threat, end quote, but they also did not know how to categorize her behavior. Categorize? She's a human. They're all targets until they submit. Yes, my lord. But as the day wore on, Thraxus saw more strange reports from this particular neighborhood. Humans who didn't run, who continued shopping, cooking, living their lives as if nothing had changed. One elderly male even complained to a Valtheran soldier about the noise their transport ship was making, saying it was disturbing his afternoon nap. These humans are defective, Corvus suggested. Perhaps they don't understand the danger. Thraxus wasn't so sure. He had seen many forms of resistance over his 300 years of conquest. He had seen warriors who fought to the last breath. He had seen populations that chose mass suicide over surrender. He had seen desperate evacuation attempts and brilliant military strategies. But this casual dismissal of his entire invasion, this was new. I will visit this district myself tomorrow, he decided. I want to see these fearless humans with my own eyes. Then, I will show them what happens to those who do not properly fear the Valtheran Empire. That night, Halmoni stood at her window, looking out at the street below. Valtheran soldiers patrolled past. Their ships hummed overhead. The normal sounds of her neighborhood children playing, couples arguing, television shows playing through open windows were gone, replaced by the sounds of occupation. But in her apartment, the rice cooker bubbled. The kimchi fermented in its pots. The plants on her windowsill still needed water. Tomorrow, she would wake up at 6. Like always. She would make breakfast. She would do her exercises. She would live her life. Let them come, she said quietly to herself. I've dealt with worse than space lizards. In the kitchen, her wooden spoon lay on the counter. The same spoon she'd used to discipline Do-yun when he was young. The same spoon she'd waved at neighborhood boys who got too rowdy. The same spoon that had kept order in her home for 30 years. Tomorrow, it would serve a new purpose. Tomorrow, an emperor would learn that fear runs both ways. The morning sun rose over Seoul, but barely anyone could see it through the shadow of the Valtheran fleet. Emperor Thraxus stood in his command center, reviewing reports from around the globe. Most cities had surrendered. Most governments had collapsed. Most humans were hiding in their homes, waiting to learn their fate. Most, but not all. This neighborhood, Thraxus said, pointing at the map display showing the Seongbuk district. Explain why civilian activity continues at 70% of normal levels. His tactical officer pulled up surveillance footage. "We don't understand it, my lord." They simply continue their routines. "Our soldiers report no armed resistance, but also no compliance with occupation protocols. They ignore us." "No one ignores the Valtheron Empire." "Yes, my lord. That's what we thought too." Thraxis watched the footage. An old woman buying vegetables. Another sweeping her doorstep. A group of elderly humans sitting on benches, talking and laughing as if his soldiers weren't patrolling 10 meters away. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding together in frustration. "I will go there myself. Prepare my honor guard." "My lord, is that wise? If there's some trap, there is no trap. There are only humans who haven't learned their place yet. I will teach them." 5. 2 hours later, Thraxis's procession moved through the streets of Seoul. His war platform floated 2 meters off the ground, carried by gravity technology that humanity wouldn't understand for centuries. Around him marched his finest soldiers, weapons ready, armor gleaming. Citizens scattered before them, finally showing the proper fear. Except in Seongbuk, when the procession entered Halmoni's neighborhood, Thraxis saw something he hadn't seen in decades. Normal life. Shops were open. People walked with purpose, rather than panic. An old man was washing his car. A woman was hanging laundry. "Stop," Thraxis commanded. His platform halted. He studied these humans, trying to understand. Were they stupid? Brain damaged? Under some kind of drug influence? That's when he saw her. Halmoni emerged from her apartment building, carrying 2 large ceramic pots. She had spent 3 weeks preparing these kimchi pots, getting the fermentation just right. She was bringing them to the building's courtyard, where she kept her fermentation station, a small area she'd set up with careful attention to temperature and shade. A Valtheron soldier, nervous and young, was backing away from a barking dog. He stumbled, and his massive armored body crashed into Halmoni's fermentation station. The pots there, 6 of them, representing months of work, toppled and shattered. Red pepper-soaked cabbage spilled across the concrete. Everything stopped. Halmoni looked at the destruction. She looked at the soldier. She looked at the kimchi she'd held in her hands, now pointless since the rest of the batch was ruined. She set the pots down very carefully, very slowly. Then she marched directly toward Emperor Thraxis. The soldiers raised their weapons, targeting lasers painted red dots on her chest. Thraxis held up one clawed hand, curious. This old female human was walking straight at him with absolutely no fear on her face. Only anger. Pure, righteous anger. She walked right through his honor guard. They parted, uncertain. She climbed onto his hover platform, which no one had ever dared to do. And before Thraxis, conqueror of 847 worlds, destroyer of civilizations, the being who made entire species tremble could react. She grabbed his auditory ridge. It was roughly where a human ear would be, though more elongated and scaled. It was also, as Halmoni's instincts correctly guessed, very sensitive. She yanked. "You!" she shouted in Korean, pulling Thraxis's head down to her level. He was twice her height, but she had the leverage of anger and a grandmother's determination. "You come to my neighborhood with your big ships and your big soldiers, and you think you can waste food?" Thraxis experienced something he hadn't felt in 3 centuries. Complete shock. His mind simply couldn't process what was happening. This elderly human female was pulling his ear, shouting at him, in a language he didn't understand, but the tone was universal. He was being scolded. 3 weeks, Halmoni continued, dragging him off his platform. He stumbled, following her grip because the alternative was letting his ear be torn off. 3 weeks I worked on that kimchi. Do you know how hard it is to get the fermentation right? Do you? The soldiers didn't know what to do. Their weapons were trained on her, but she was right next to the Emperor. They couldn't fire without hitting him. They waited for orders. Thraxis gave none. He was too stunned. Halmoni pulled him across the courtyard to the broken pots. "Look at this," Look, this was going to be for the whole neighborhood. For Heijin, whose husband is sick. For Sunbok, who's too old to make her own anymore. For the children in Building 3, who love my kimchi. And your clumsy soldier destroyed it. She finally released his ear. Thraxus stood there, towering over her, his face unreadable. He could kill her with one swipe of his claws. He could order her vaporized. He could destroy this entire neighborhood. Clean it up, Halmoni said, pointing at the broken pottery and spilled kimchi. Thraxus stared at her. Did I stutter? Clean it up. You broke it, you fix it. And then something impossible happened. Emperor Thraxus, supreme commander of the Valtheron fleet, conqueror of worlds, knelt down and began picking up broken pottery. He didn't know why he was doing it. The words no, or I refuse, or kill this impudent human simply wouldn't form in his mind. He found himself following her orders, collecting the shards while she supervised with her arms crossed, occasionally telling him to be more careful or mind the sharp edges. Doyun watched from the apartment window above, his mouth hanging open. Around the courtyard, other neighbors emerged, watching in silence. The Valtheron soldiers stood frozen, their weapons lowering slowly as they tried to understand what they were seeing. Heijin leaned over to Sunbok and whispered, "That's our Halmoni. She made my son clean up, after breaking my dishes too." "Good technique," Sunbok agreed. Firm voice, direct eye contact, classic grandmother authority. It took 10 minutes. Thraxus filled 2 large bags with broken pottery and ruined kimchi under Halmoni's direction. When he was done, she inspected his work, nodded once, and pointed to the trash area. "Over there, and wash your hands after. Who knows where those claws have been?" Thraxus disposed of the bags. He looked at his hands, claws that had personally killed thousands, and found himself actually considering washing them. What was happening to him? When he turned back, Halmoni was already walking away, back to her building. She paused at the entrance and looked back at him. "Next time, watch where your soldiers walk. And tell them to stop making so much noise in the morning. People are trying to sleep." Then, she was gone. Thraxus stood in the courtyard for a long moment. His soldiers stared at him. His command staff, watching through the helmet cameras, stared at their screens. Across the Valtheron fleet, confusion rippled through every ship. Admiral Corvus's voice came through Thraxus's communicator. "My lord, did you just take orders from a human?" Thraxus didn't answer. He couldn't answer. He returned to his hover platform and gave the order to return to the command center. The entire way back, he remained silent. That evening, the video spread across every network on Earth. Humans watched in amazement and terror. The Valtheron Empire watched in confusion and concern. Their emperor had been pulled by the ear like a misbehaving child. Their emperor had cleaned up trash on his knees. Their emperor had been bested by a grandmother with a wooden spoon tucked in her apron pocket. In her apartment, Halmoni prepared dinner for Doyun. She moved through her kitchen with practiced ease, humming an old song. Her grandson sat at the table, still in shock. "Halmoni, do you understand what you did today? I scolded someone who needed scolding. Same as I did with you when you were young. That wasn't just someone. That was the alien emperor. He could have killed you." She set a bowl of rice in front of him. But he didn't. He listened. Because deep down, everyone knows when they've done wrong. Even space lizards. What if he comes back? Then I'll scold him again. She sat down with her own bowl. "Now eat before it gets cold. And tomorrow, you're helping me make more kimchi. We have to replace what was lost." Doyun ate. But his hands trembled slightly. His grandmother had grabbed an alien emperor by the ear and lived. Nothing made sense anymore. In his command ship orbiting Earth, Thraxus sat alone in his private chambers. He kept replaying the moment in his mind. That female human had shown no fear. None at all. only anger. Righteous anger over wasted food and broken community property. When was the last time anyone had treated him like a person who could be wrong? Who should know better? Centuries. Maybe longer. He touched his auditory ridge. It still tingled, where she'd grabbed it. Fascinating, he said to the empty room. The video played on every screen in the galaxy. Human news networks showed it constantly. Valtheron military channels analyzed it frame by frame. Social media platforms on 100 worlds shared it endlessly. An elderly human woman had grabbed Emperor Thraxus by the ear and made him clean up garbage. In the Valtheron fleet, discipline was starting to crack. "Sir, another ship is requesting clarification on protocol," a communications officer reported to Admiral Corvus. "They want to know if we're still following standard occupation procedures or if we're taking orders from elderly humans now." Corvus's scales darkened with anger. "Tell them to maintain their posts and await orders from the Emperor." "The Emperor hasn't given any orders in 18 hours, sir." That was the problem. Thraxus had returned to his command ship and locked himself in his private chambers. He wasn't answering calls. He wasn't issuing commands. He was just thinking. On Earth, resistance groups that had been preparing for guerrilla warfare didn't know what to do. World leaders who had drafted surrender terms waited nervously. Scientists who had been trying to understand Valtheron technology paused in confusion. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Except Halmoni. She went to the market. It was early morning, and she carried her cloth shopping bag over one arm. The vegetable shop was open, though Hagen looked tired. Running a business during an alien invasion was stressful. "Good morning," Halmoni said. "I need radishes, the large ones." "Did you really grab that alien emperor?" Hagen asked, pulling out the radishes. "He needed correcting. Everyone's talking about it. My daughter called from Busan. She said you're all over the internet." "The internet," Halmoni said dismissively. "Nothing good comes from that thing. These radishes. Are they fresh?" "Picked yesterday." "Halmoni, aren't you worried? What if he comes back angry?" Then he comes back angry. "I'll deal with it." Halmoni selected her radishes carefully, pressing them to check for firmness. "That one. That one. Not that one, it's too soft." Behind her, someone cleared their throat. A deep, rumbling sound. Halmoni turned around and found herself looking at Emperor Thraxus. He had come alone, without his guards or his floating platform. He stood in the doorway of the vegetable shop, having to duck his head to fit through the frame made for humans. The shop went completely silent. Hagen dropped a cabbage. Another customer made a small squeaking sound and froze like a mouse seeing a cat. Halmoni looked at him, unimpressed. "You're blocking the doorway. Other people need to get in and out." Thraxus moved aside. His yellow eyes were fixed on Halmoni, with an expression that might have been curiosity or might have been hunger. It was hard to tell, with alien faces. "You," he said, his voice translator making his words sound hollow and mechanical. "Yesterday, you touched me. You broke my kimchi pots. I am the Emperor of 847 worlds. No one touches me. Well, I did. And I'll do it again, if you break more of my things." She turned back to Hagen. "How much for these radishes?" End quote. Hagen couldn't take her eyes off Thraxus. "Free. Take them for free. Don't be ridiculous. I'll pay proper price." Halmoni counted out bills and set them on the counter. Then she turned to Thraxus. "Are you going to stand there all day, or do you need something?" "I came to understand." "Understand what?" "You. Your species. This." He gestured vaguely, at the shop, the street, the neighborhood. "You show no fear. I say, should I be afraid?" "Yes. I have destroyed planets. And win. 2. And win. And win." Halmoni picked up her shopping bag. "Have you destroyed this one yet?" No. Then what is there to fear right now? Fear doesn't help me cook dinner. Fear doesn't help me take care of my grandson. Fear is useless until there's something specific to be afraid of. She started walking toward the door. Now move. You're still blocking the way. Lug them under. Thraxis moved. Then, to his own surprise, he followed her out of the shop. Halmoni walked down the street at her steady grandmother pace. Not hurried, but not slow either. Thraxis followed a few steps behind, his massive form drawing stares from every human they passed. People scattered out of their way, but Halmoni just kept walking. Why are you following me? She asked without looking back. I don't know. That's a stupid answer. No one had called Emperor Thraxis stupid in at least 200 years. He found he didn't mind it from her. Carry this, Halmoni said, holding out her shopping bag. I am not a servant. She looked at him with that same expression from yesterday. The one that made him feel like he was small and disappointing. Young people should help old people carry heavy things. It's called respect. End. I am 317 years old. Then you're old enough to know better. Take the bag. Thraxis took the bag. It weighed almost nothing to him, but he carried it carefully. They walked together through the neighborhood. Halmoni stopped at another shop to buy green onions. Then at another for bean paste. Each time, the shopkeepers stared at Thraxis in terror, but each time Halmoni just conducted her business normally. The Emperor of 847 worlds stood behind her, holding a cloth shopping bag full of vegetables. Your soldiers are too loud, Halmoni said as they walked. Last night they were stomping around until 2 in the morning. People have work in the morning. We are maintaining security patrols. Maintain them more quietly. That's not how military operations work. Then your military operations are rude. Of course I eat. Try this. She bought 2 hotdogs and handed him one. Thraxis looked at the small, round pancake in his clawed hand. It was warm. Steam rose from it. The smell was sweet and unfamiliar. It will burn your mouth if you bite too fast. Let it cool. He waited. Then he took a careful bite. The sweetness surprised him. It wasn't like Valtheron food, which was usually savory or bitter. This was pleasant. Good, yes? Halmoni asked. It's acceptable, Thraxis said, but he took another bite immediately. They continued walking. Thraxis realized they were heading back to her apartment building. Other elderly humans were sitting outside the ones he'd seen on the surveillance footage. They looked at him with suspicion but not fear. One of them, Soonbok, nodded at Halmoni. That's the ear grabber, she said to Myunghi. I saw the video. Good form, Myunghi replied. Halmoni led Thraxis up 3 flights of stairs to her apartment. Take off your shoes, she said at the door. What? Shoes off. This is a home, not a battlefield. Thraxis looked down at his armored boots. They were part of his combat suit, designed to never be removed. He triggered the release mechanism, and they unlatched with a hiss. He stepped out of them, feeling strangely vulnerable. The apartment was small by his standards. 1 bedroom, a main room with a television and a small table, a kitchen that was barely more than a counter, and a stove. But it was clean and organized. Pictures covered the walls, human family members, he assumed. The grandson from yesterday, a male and female, who looked similar to Halmoni but younger. Dead, probably. Sit, Halmoni said, pointing at the table. You carried my groceries. I'll make you proper food. I don't need. Sit. He sat. The chair was too small for him, but he managed to fold himself onto it, his knees nearly touching his chest. Halmoni worked in the kitchen with practiced efficiency. She moved like someone who had cooked thousands of meals, every motion automatic. She asked him questions while she worked. Do you have family? I had a clutch mother. She died 300 years ago. Children? No. Emperors don't produce offspring. Too much risk of succession wars. That's lonely. Thraxis didn't know how to respond to that. He watched her chop vegetables with quick, precise cuts. What are you making? Soup, rice, kimchi, obviously. Some seasoned vegetables. Basic meal. Why are you feeding me? You're in my home. You're hungry. That's enough reason. I could have destroyed your world. Could have. But you haven't yet. She glanced at him. Are you planning to? Thraxis thought about that question. Was he? The occupation was proceeding according to plan. Earth's resources would feed his empire. Its people would serve as labor. This was what he did. This was what he had always done. I don't know, he said honestly. Then until you decide, you might as well eat properly. She brought the food to the table. Simple dishes, but they smelled incredible. She showed him how to use chopsticks, though his claws made it difficult. She didn't laugh when he struggled. She just adjusted his grip patiently, like teaching a child. They ate in silence for a while. Then Halmoni spoke. My husband died 15 years ago. Heart attack. My daughter and her husband died 5 years ago. Car accident. I raised Doyun and his sister, myself. That's a lot of loss. Life is loss. But it's also this. She gestured at the table. The food. The apartment. Small moments. Daily routines. Taking care of the people around you. That's what makes it worth living. Thraxis ate his soup. It was good. Better than good. When was the last time anyone had cooked for him? Not served him at a formal banquet, but actually cooked for him like a person. My world was destroyed in a war, he said suddenly. Before I became emperor, everyone I knew died. So, I joined the military, worked my way up, conquered other worlds, because mine was gone. Revenge? Purpose. Halmoni nodded. Revenge and purpose. They look the same. From far away, but they're not. They finished eating. Halmoni refused his help with cleaning, so Thraxis sat awkwardly at the small table, watching her wash dishes by hand. Outside the window, his massive fleet hung in the sky. Inside this apartment, an old woman hummed while doing housework. He should leave. He should return to his command ship and finish the occupation. He should execute this woman for disrespecting him. Come back tomorrow, Halmoni said as she walked him to the door. I'll teach you to make kimchi properly. Since your soldier destroyed mine, you owe me help. Making more. I have an empire to run. The empire can wait. Kimchi can't. Tomorrow, 9 in the morning. Don't be late. Thraxis put his boots back on. He stood in the doorway, looking down at this small, elderly human who had somehow turned his entire world upside down in 2 days. I could still destroy everything, he said quietly. Yes. Halmoni agreed. But you won't. How do you know? Because you came back. Because you carried my groceries. Because you ate my food and told me about your dead world. She smiled. But it was sad. You're lonely. Lonely people don't destroy the first place that feels like home in a long time. She closed the door gently, leaving Thraxis standing in the hallway. He returned to his ship in silence. His command staff was waiting with reports, questions, urgent matters requiring decisions. He waved them all away. In his private chambers, he sat in the dark and thought about soup, about an old woman who showed no fear, about a small apartment that felt warmer than any palace he'd conquered, about how he'd be going back tomorrow at 9 in the morning to make kimchi. 3 weeks passed, and the galaxy watched in confusion as the Valtheron occupation of Earth ground to a strange, slow halt. Emperor Thraxis went to Halmoni's apartment every morning at 9. He learned to make kimchi, which was harder than conquering planets. The vegetables had to be cut just right. The pepper paste needed exact proportions. The fermentation required patience he didn't know he had. No, 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 Halmoni would say, taking the knife from his clawed hands. Like this, gentle but firm. You're chopping vegetables, not killing enemies. He learned to use chopsticks properly. He learned that you don't start eating until the eldest person at the table picks up their spoon. He learned that when someone's glass is empty, you fill it for them. He learned 100 small rules about respect and community that the Valtheron Empire had forgotten long ago. The neighborhood Ajumas adopted him like a stray cat. Heijin from the vegetable shop would call out to him when he passed. "Thraxis, these peppers are perfect for kimchi today." She no longer feared him. She treated him like a neighbor. Sunbok taught him proper posture. "You slouch," she said, poking him with her cane. "Stand up straight. You're an emperor, aren't you? Act like it." Myung-hee introduced him to her book club, 5 elderly women who met every Thursday to discuss novels. Thraxis sat in a circle with them, drinking tea from a cup too small for his hands, discussing human literature he barely understood. But they explained patiently, and he listened. His command staff didn't know what to do. "Sir, we need orders," Admiral Corvus said during one of their rare official meetings. "The fleet is waiting. Other conquered worlds are questioning why Earth hasn't been fully processed yet." Thraxis looked up from the human novel he was reading, a story about a man who learned to appreciate simple life. Tell them Earth is a special case. We're studying human psychology before proceeding." "For 3 weeks?" "Yes." Corvus's scales shifted colors, showing his frustration. "My lord, the troops are confused. Half of them think you've been compromised by some human weapon. The other half think you're playing a long strategic game they don't understand." "Maybe I am. Which one?" Thraxis didn't answer. He wasn't sure himself. Doyun came to visit his grandmother one evening and found Emperor Thraxis at the table, helping her prepare vegetables for soup. The sight was so absurd that Doyun just stood in the doorway, staring. "Don't just stand there," Halmoni said. "Come in, set the table. We have a guest." "He's not a guest, Halmoni. He's an alien emperor who invaded our planet." "He's both. People can be 2 things." Doyun set the table because arguing with his grandmother was pointless. He sat down across from Thraxis, and they looked at each other with mutual awkwardness. "Your grandmother is very insistent," Thraxis said finally. "Yes, she is." "You raised him?" Thraxis asked Halmoni. "After his parents died. He was 7. His sister was 10. That must have been difficult." "Everything worth doing is difficult." Halmoni brought the soup to the table. "Doyun is a teacher now. 4th grade. A teacher." Thraxis looked at the young man with new interest. "You train young humans?" "I teach them. Math, reading, science. Basic stuff." "Why?" Doyun blinked. "What do you mean? Why? Why spend your time teaching small humans?" Doyun had never really thought about it that way. "I guess I want them to have better lives than they would without education. I want them to understand the world." End quote. To think for themselves. To be good people. You get no territory from this. No resources. No. I get to see them learn. Sometimes a kid who struggled all year finally understands something, and their face lights up. That's enough. Thraxis ate his soup slowly, thinking about this. In his empire, everything was about gain, territory, resources, strategic advantage. The idea of spending your limited life energy just to help small beings learn, with no personal benefit, was foreign to him, but it also reminded him of something. Of his own clutch mother, who had spent hours teaching him to read the old texts from their destroyed homeworld. She had gained nothing from it except his education. He had never thanked her properly. She died in the war before he could. "That's a good purpose," Thraxis said quietly. Over dinner, Doyun told stories about his students. The girl who loved math, but hated reading. The boy who couldn't sit still, but had a gift for art. The child from a poor family who came to school hungry, so Doyun kept snacks in his desk. Small stories about small lives. But Doyun told them like they mattered, because to him, they did. Thraxis realized he couldn't remember the last time anyone in his empire had talked about individuals this way. In military reports, there were only numbers, casualties, production quotas, population counts, not people with names and personalities and small dreams. After dinner, Thraxus helped wash dishes. Doyun watched in disbelief as the conqueror of 847 worlds stood at his grandmother's sink, carefully washing bowls. "This is insane," Doyun muttered. "It's nice," Halmoni corrected. "He's learning." Learning what? How to do dishes. How to be part of something. Community. Family. Connection. She dried a plate and handed it to Doyun to put away. "He's been alone a long time. Lonely people do terrible things. But if you show them there's another way to live, sometimes they change. He invaded our planet, Halmoni. I know. But he hasn't destroyed it. And every day he comes here, eats with us, learns from us, is another day he's not giving orders to hurt people. That's worth something." Thraxus pretended not to hear this conversation, but his enhanced hearing picked up every word. She was right. Each day he spent in this neighborhood was a day he wasn't being an emperor. He was just being. The book club meetings became his favorite time. The 5 elderly women, Halmoni, Sunbok, Myung-hee, Haejin, and a woman named Jiwon, who had recently joined, would discuss books with passion and humor. They argued about characters' motivations. They laughed at funny passages. They cried at sad endings. "What did you think of the main character?" Jiwon asked Thraxus during one meeting. They were reading a novel about a soldier returning from war. "He was weak," Thraxus said. "He should have continued fighting. But he was tired," Halmoni countered. "He wanted peace. Peace is for the defeated." "No," Sunbok said firmly. "Peace is for the wise. Anyone can fight. It takes strength to stop fighting and build something instead." Thraxus thought about his 300 years of conquest. Building empires on top of ruins. Always moving to the next war. The next world. The next victory. Had he ever actually built anything? Or just taken what others built? The question bothered him for days. But while Thraxus was learning about humanity in a small Seoul neighborhood, the rest of his empire was growing impatient. Admiral Corvus received communications from other fleet commanders, from governors of occupied worlds, from military leadership back on the Valtheron homeworld, all asking the same question. What is Emperor Thraxus doing on Earth? Corvus didn't have a good answer. The official line was, studying human psychology for optimal occupation strategy. But everyone knew that was nonsense. You didn't study psychology by making kimchi with old ladies. Some commanders started talking about intervention, about rescuing the Emperor from whatever human trick had compromised him, about taking control of the Earth occupation themselves and finishing it properly. Corvus himself was torn. He had served Thraxus for 70 years. He respected his Emperor. But this behavior was beyond unusual. It was dangerous. It made the entire empire look weak. He decided to see for himself. Corvus came to the neighborhood one afternoon with a small security detail. He found Emperor Thraxus sitting on a bench outside Halmoni's building, surrounded by elderly human females. They were teaching him to play a tile game called Go Stop. "You're terrible at this," Myung-hee said, collecting his tiles. "Pay attention to what other players are collecting." "I am paying attention." "No, you're thinking about strategy for next round. This game is about now. The moment. The current play." Corvus stared at this scene, unable to process it. His emperor, was being scolded by elderly humans while playing a tile game. "My lord," Corvus said, his voice tight with control. "May I speak with you?" Thraxus looked up. "Corvus, you came to visit." "I came to report on fleet status." Privately, Thraxus excused himself from the game and walked with Corvus to a quieter area of the street. His admiral looked stressed, scales showing colors of frustration and concern. "My lord, the fleet is talking about you." About this. Corvus gestured at the neighborhood. You need to either finish this occupation or explain what strategic purpose these social visits serve. What if there is no strategic purpose? Corvus's eyes widened. Then what are we doing here? I don't know, Thraxus admitted. For 300 years, I knew exactly what I was doing. Conquest. Expansion. Victory. But these humans. He looked back at the bench, where the Ajumas were continuing their game. They show me a different way. Purpose without conquest. Community without dominance. They're stronger than any species I've defeated, but not because of weapons. They have no strength. We could destroy them in days. Could we? We have the weapons. Yes. But look around, Corvus. Really look. We've been here a month. Have they submitted? Have they broken? They just continue, living their lives, taking care of each other. They're not defeated because they refuse to believe they can be defeated. That's insane. Maybe. Or maybe we're the insane ones, spending centuries destroying and taking instead of building and connecting. Corvus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. The other commanders are planning to intervene. They think you've been compromised by human weapons or drugs. They're talking about taking control of the fleet. Let them try. My lord. I'm tired, Corvus. 300 years of war. 300 years of victory that meant nothing except more war. These humans, this grandmother who pulled my ear and made me clean up garbage, she's shown me more truth in 3 weeks than I learned in 3 centuries of conquest. Before Corvus could respond, Halmoni appeared beside them. Neither of them had heard her approach. Are you arguing? She asked, looking between them. We're discussing military matters, Corvus said stiffly. Sounds like arguing to me. Come inside. Both of you. I made too much food, and you'll help me eat it. I don't, Corvus began. That wasn't a request. And somehow, Admiral Corvus found himself in Halmoni's small apartment. Sitting at her table, being served soup and rice and kimchi, while she chatted about her grandson's upcoming birthday plans. Thraxus ate quietly, watching his old friend experience the same confusion he had felt weeks ago. Your scales are pretty, Halmoni said to Corvus, catching him completely off guard. Lighter than his. More silver. Thank you, but you're very stiff. Too much tension. You need to relax more. Relaxation is inefficient. Inefficiency is underrated. She refilled his soup bowl without asking if he wanted more. Sometimes, the best things in life are inefficient. Cooking a slow meal. Taking a long walk. Sitting with friends, and talking about nothing important. Corvus ate his soup. It was good. Better than military rations. Better than the formal meals served at official functions. Just good, simple food. He glanced at Thraxus and saw something in his emperor's expression. Peace. Actual peace. How long since he'd seen that? When they left that evening, Corvus paused outside the building. My lord, what happens now? I don't know. But I know I can't go back to what I was before. The fleet won't accept this indefinitely. I know. They stood in silence, watching lights come on in apartment windows as evening settled over the neighborhood, families gathering for dinner, people finishing their day's work, normal life continuing despite the alien fleet hanging overhead. She called my scales pretty, Corvus said suddenly. Thraxus actually laughed for the first time in decades. She told me, I have good posture now. After weeks of her friend poking me with a cane. This is madness. Yes, but it's the best madness I've ever experienced. But neither of them saw the other ships moving into position above Earth. Neither of them knew that other commanders had decided intervention was necessary. Neither of them knew that the peace of this small neighborhood was about to be shattered by those who believed that emperors should rule, not make kimchi. The crisis was coming. And Thraxus would have to choose the empire he built or the life he was learning to live. The new ships arrived at dawn. They were larger than Thraxus's fleet. Darker, more heavily armed. They positioned themselves directly above Sol, weapons charged and ready. Admiral Corvus saw them first and immediately contacted Thraxus. "My lord, we have a situation. Fleet Commander Vraxus has arrived with the Third Armada." Thraxus looked up from the cucumber he was slicing. Halmoni was teaching him a new recipe. "Vraxus? Why would he bring the Third Armada to Earth?" "I think you know why, my lord." The answer came an hour later, when Vraxus's face appeared on every screen in Sol. He was older than Thraxus, with darker scales and scars crossing his face. He had served the Empire for 400 years and had never questioned an order in his life. Until now. "Attention, humans of Earth. I am Fleet Commander Vraxus, of the Valtheron Third Armada. Your planet was to be processed and incorporated into the Empire. This has not happened due to Emperor Thraxus's compromise. Therefore, I am assuming command of occupation operations. You have 12 hours to gather in designated areas for processing. Resistance will be met with immediate extermination." In Halmoni's apartment, the broadcast played on her small television. She looked at Thraxus, who had frozen with the knife in his hand. "Processing?" she asked. "What does that mean?" "Sorting. Evaluation. Assignment to labor groups. Elimination of those deemed unproductive." His voice was hollow. "It's standard procedure for newly conquered populations. And you were going to do this to us?" Yes, before you learned to make kimchi? Before I understood that you're people, not resources." Doyun, who had stayed over the previous night, looked at the screen in horror. "They're going to kill people. Old people. Sick people. Children they think are useless." Halmoni turned off the television with a sharp click. "No, they're not. Halmoni, you saw those ships. They're bigger than the ones already here. We can't. I didn't say we're going to fight them with weapons." She looked at Thraxus. "You need to stop this. Vraxus has more ships, more firepower. If I challenge him, there will be a battle. Many will die. Many will die if you don't challenge him." Thraxus set down the knife carefully. She was right, of course. She was always right. He had been living in this peaceful bubble for weeks, pretending the rest of his empire didn't exist, but it did exist. And now, it was coming to destroy the first place that had felt like home in 300 years. "I need to return to my command ship." "Not yet. First you eat. You can't make important decisions on an empty stomach. There's no time." She fixed him with that look. He sat down. They ate quickly, but Halmoni made sure he finished everything on his plate. "Whatever happens today," she said, "remember this. Remember what it feels like to sit at a table with people who care about you. Remember that this is what you're fighting for now. Not conquest. Connection." Thraxus returned to his command ship to find chaos. Half his fleet had declared for Vraxus. The other half was loyal to him, but confused about what he wanted them to do. Admiral Corvus was trying to maintain order. "My lord, we need your orders. Vraxus is demanding you surrender. Command or face him in combat. Tell him I'll meet with him. Neutral ground. Just us. He'll try to kill you. Probably. Arrange it anyway." They met on the roof of a tall building in central Seoul. Two ancient warriors standing above a city that neither of them had created. Vraxus looked at Thraxus with something like pity. "You were the greatest of us," Vraxus said. 847 worlds. Victories beyond counting. And you threw it all away for what? Friendship with prey animals? They're not prey. They're people. They're resources, food, labor, territory. That's all any conquered species is. What happened to you, Vraxus? You used to have honor. I still have honor. Honor to the Empire. Honor to our way of life. You're the one who's changed, Thraxus. These humans have broken you with their soft words and their soft ways. They haven't broken me. They've reminded me what I lost. What we all lost when we turned conquest into our only purpose. And Vraxus's hand moved to his weapon. Then you've chosen them over the Empire. One old emperor over 400 years of tradition. Yes, the fight was brutal and short. Thraxus was younger, faster, but Vraxus had the rage of absolute certainty. They crashed across the rooftop, weapons discarded, fighting with claws and strength. Blood spilled, dark Valtheron blood that steamed in the morning air. Below, on the streets, people watched. The battle was broadcast across the planet. Two alien commanders fighting over Earth's fate. In her apartment, Halmoni watched with her hands clutched together, barely breathing. Thraxus was losing. Vraxus had him pinned, claws at his throat. It didn't have to be this way. You could have remained great. I am great, Thraxus gasped. Because I learned to change. He managed to throw Vraxus off, but they were both badly wounded now. They circled each other slowly. Even if you beat me, Vraxus said, the Empire won't accept this. They'll send more fleets, more commanders. They'll never let you keep this world as a pet. Then I'll fight them too. As many as it takes. Why? What's so special about these humans? They taught me that strength isn't just about power over others. It's about choosing not to use that power. It's about building instead of destroying. It's about sitting at a table with someone and sharing a meal, even when you could conquer them instead. Vraxus laughed. A bitter sound. You've gone soft. No, I've gone sane. They fought again. But Thraxus's words had done something. Planted a seed of doubt. Vraxus's attacks became less certain, less committed. And in that moment of hesitation, Thraxus struck. Vraxus fell, defeated but not dead. Vraxus stood over him, breathing hard. He could kill him, should kill him, by the laws of the Empire. But he thought about Halmoni's lessons, about mercy, about choosing to be different. Go, Thraxus said. Take your ships and leave. Tell the Empire that Earth is under my personal protection. Anyone who wants to challenge that can face me directly. Vraxus looked up at him with confusion and something that might have been respect. Yes. Now go, before I reconsider mercy. But Vraxus's ships didn't leave immediately. His commanders wanted to know what to do. The Third Armada hung in the sky, weapons still charged, waiting for orders. That's when Halmoni did something that would be talked about for generations. She went outside. She walked down to the main street, where Valtheron soldiers were still patrolling. She brought her wooden spoon. Behind her, the other Ajumas followed. Heijin, Sunbok, Myunghee, Jiwon, 5 elderly women marching toward an alien armada. What are you doing? Doyun called after his grandmother. Settling this, she called back. They marched through the neighborhood, gathering other humans as they went. Not soldiers, not resistance fighters, just people. Young mothers with children, shop owners, teachers, students, hundreds of normal people following 5 elderly women with absolute confidence. The soldiers didn't know what to do. These humans weren't armed, weren't threatening, just walking calmly toward the landing zone, where Vraxus's command shuttle waited. Halmoni walked right up to the shuttle. The guards raised their weapons. Put those down, she said firmly. I need to speak to your commander. The commander doesn't take orders from... I'm not giving orders. I'm requesting a conversation. There's a difference. Now, let me through, or I'll be very disappointed in you. Something about her tone, the same tone that had made Emperor Thraxus clean up garbage, made the guards step aside. Vraxus emerged from the shuttle, still wounded from his fight. He looked at this small human female with confusion. What is this? What? This, Halmoni said, gesturing to the crowd behind her, is what you're planning to destroy. Vraxus looked. He saw children holding their parents' hands. He saw elderly people standing proud despite their fear. He saw young people ready to die for their families. He saw community. They're just humans, he said. but his voice lacked conviction. Just humans who make food for their neighbors, who teach children, who care for the elderly, who help each other survive hard times. She stepped closer. Your emperor told me your world was destroyed, that you lost your family. Don't you remember what that was like? Having people who mattered? Vraxis's scales shifted colors, emotional distress. But you remember. Somewhere inside all that armor and all those weapons, you remember what it felt like to be part of something, to belong somewhere, to have a home. She reached into her bag and pulled out a container. Here. I made extra soup this morning. Sit. Eat. Then we'll talk about what happens next. Vraxis stared at the container like it was a weapon. You want me to eat? Now? When better? Fighting on an empty stomach is foolish. That goes for conquering planets too. And somehow, impossibly, Fleet Commander Vraxis sat down on the pavement of a human street. Halmoni sat across from him. She opened the container and handed him a spoon. The massive alien warrior took it with claws that had killed thousands. The other Ajamas distributed food to the confused Valtheron soldiers. Myunghi offered kimchi. Heijin brought fresh bread. Sunbok had rice cakes. One by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons and took the food. Humans and Valtheroni sat together in the street, sharing a meal. The most unlikely peace treaty in galactic history. Negotiated by grandmothers with Tupperware. Vraxis ate slowly. The soup was good. Warm. It reminded him of something from before the wars, before the Empire, before he had forgotten what it meant to be anything other than a weapon. This is good, he said quietly. Thank you. The secret is simmering it slowly. Can't rush good soup. Why are you doing this? We came to destroy your world. Because destruction is easy. Anyone with weapons can destroy. But building, feeding, caring, that takes real strength. I'm showing you that humans have that strength, and I think, maybe. Tears formed in Vraxis's eyes, a biological function Valtheroni rarely displayed. He remembered his homeworld, his mate, his offspring, all lost when their planet died in the old wars. He had spent 400 years trying to fill that hole with conquest. But conquest just created more holes in more people. I'm tired, he said, and it was the most honest thing he'd said in centuries. I know. So rest. Stop fighting. Stop conquering. Just. Thraxis arrived with Corvus, expecting to find a battle. Instead, he found his greatest enemy eating soup with a human grandmother, while their troops shared food in the street. What? Thraxis couldn't find words. Halmoni looked up at him. Oh good. You're here. Vraxis and I were just discussing how tired you both are. How tired your whole empire is. Sit down. Have some soup. Then we'll figure out what comes next. Thraxis sat. Corvus sat. 2 emperors and 2 admirals, eating soup on a human street, while their fleets hung overhead with no idea what to do. The Empire won't accept this, Vraxis said. Even if I stand down, they'll send others. Then we change the Empire. Thraxis replied. Not overnight. Not easily. But world by world, commander by commander, we show them there's another way. What way? Connection instead of conquest. Cooperation instead of domination. He looked at Halmoni. One meal at a time. One conversation at a time. One grandmother pulling one emperor's ear at a time, until we remember what we lost when we forgot how to be more than warriors. Vraxis was quiet for a long moment. Then he made his decision. I'll return to the homeworld. I'll tell them, Earth is a special case, a research project. That will buy you time. But others will come eventually. Let them come. We'll feed them soup too. Over the following days, Vraxis's fleet withdrew, but he left behind something unexpected: several commanders and their crews who asked to stay. To learn. To understand what had changed Thraxis so completely, Thraxis began the slow work of transformation. He contacted other conquered worlds, offered them new terms. Not freedom. The Empire wasn't ready for that yet, but dignity, respect, partnership instead of slavery. Many worlds rejected it, not believing it was real, but some accepted. And that was a start. He established Earth as the Empire's first cultural exchange zone. Humans would teach Valtheroni about community, art, food, family. In return, Valtheroni would share technology, protection, knowledge. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, misunderstandings, violence. Change never came easy, but it was change. Real change. And it started in a small apartment in Seoul. 6 months later, Thraxis stood in Halmoni's kitchen, preparing kimchi. He could do it by himself now, though she still supervised with critical eyes. Doyun was getting married next month, and they needed to make enough for the wedding feast. More pepper paste, Halmoni said. Don't be stingy. I'm putting plenty. Plenty is what I say is plenty, not what you say. More. He added more. Outside the window, Valtheron and human children played together in the courtyard. His fleet still orbited Earth. But now, they were guardians, rather than conquerors. He had declared Earth a protected world, not a conquered one. The Empire Council had argued, threatened, demanded his resignation. He had refused. Some had accepted it, others hadn't. There would be more battles, more challenges. But he wasn't alone anymore. When's the wedding? He asked. 3 weeks. An emperor at a human wedding. That will be unusual. Everything about this is unusual. That's what makes it interesting. She tasted the kimchi, considering. Good. It's good. You're learning. I had a good teacher. Many good teachers. Don't forget the Ajumas. Soonbok still wants to improve your posture. He laughed. Actual laughter. Something he did now without thinking about it. Noted. That evening, as the sun set over Seoul, Thraxis prepared to leave. But at the door, he paused. He turned to Halmoni, and for the first time since he was young, since before the wars, before the Empire, before he became a conqueror, he did something his species only did for those they loved deeply. He knelt. Not in submission. Not in defeat. But in gratitude and respect. The Emperor of 847 worlds, kneeling before an elderly human who had taught him how to live again. Thank you, he said simply. Halmoni looked at him with soft eyes. Then she reached out and patted his head, the way she used to pat Doyun's when he was small. You're welcome. Now get up. Emperors shouldn't kneel on hard floors at your age. You'll hurt your knees. He stood, smiled, and left. Outside, the neighborhood continued its evening routine. Shops closing. Families gathering for dinner. Children being called home. The sound of life, continuing as it always did, one day at a time. High above, the Valtheron fleet maintained its position. But now, they were learning too. Learning that the strongest force in the universe wasn't weapons or warships. It was the stubborn, fierce love of ordinary people who refused to let you waste your life or disrespect your better nature. It was grandmothers who grabbed ears and made emperors clean up their messes. It was soup shared on a street between enemies. It was the simple, revolutionary act of choosing connection over conquest. The galaxy would never be the same. And it started because one grandmother refused to fear an emperor. She had kimchi to make, after all. And that was far too important to waste time on fear.